Wait for it. Wait for it. And we're live. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans. It's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just a couple of nerdy veterans, a stabby chaos coordinator, and one chief shenanigator geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, we're going to let our guest, Mr. Kieran Fanning, introduce himself to our listeners and viewers at home.
Hi guys, Kieran Fanning is my name. I'm from Ireland. I'm a teacher and I write books for kids. And my latest book is called Ticket to Mars, and it's a sci-fi novel.
Okay. So what got you into wanting to write kids' books as opposed to any other kind of books you could have written?
I suppose my best memories of reading were children's books, and I suppose my favorite books were children's books, and I love that time growing up with kids' books, and I suppose they have the strongest memories for me and the best memories. So I guess I never probably grew up in terms of writing, so I still write for kids.
Okay. Now, do you prefer young adult, middle grade, or is there a certain age range you prefer to write for?
It's probably middle grade, yeah, and leaning towards the upper end, so upper middle grade.
Okay. All right. So before we get too deep in this interview, we do have to do the religion questions. Are you ready for this?
Ready to go?
All right. Star Wars, Star Trek, or Firefly?
Star Trek.
Okay. What is it about Trek that appeals to you?
I never saw Star Wars when it came out as a kid, and I don't even know what Firefly is. So Star Trek was on the TV, so that was the only answer I could choose.
That's fair. That's fair. All right, and because we are polytheistic here at the Blasters and Blades podcast, Game of Thrones, The Wheel of Time, or Chronicles of Narnia?
That's a tough one now. I'd probably go with Game of Thrones, but I do like the Chronicles of Narnia as well.
Okay. One of the crying shames of adulthood is we stop asking each other the important questions. And thanks to the generosity of our sponsors, we're bringing that back. And I'm going to ask you, Kieran, what is your favorite dinosaur?
Probably a Triceratops.
Oh, that's an excellent answer because that's one of my favorites. What is it about the Triceratops that you like?
I don't know. It's just they look so kind of weird and odd. They kind of look like the sort of ones that will get bullied, but yet they don't because they're tough. They're just kind of strange looking, yeah.
Yeah, that works. All right, and because we are civilized human beings here at the Blasters and Blades podcast, we are no longer knuckle-dragging troglodytes. We're going to ask you, sir, coffee or tea, and how do you take it?
Definitely tea. I take it with milk, small bit of milk, and that's it.
Now, when you say tea, is there a certain kind of tea you drink? Because I know there's lots of kinds.
It's just a regular kind of breakfast tea that I would drink.
Okay. Is there a certain time? Do you drink breakfast tea at breakfast, or is that something you drink all day?
I drink it all day. Tea is a big thing in Ireland, having cups of tea. Coffee is relatively new for most Irish people. I say new, I mean, in the last kind of 15, 20 years, but tea is a huge drink in Ireland. People have it with breakfast, dinner. They might have tea 4, 5, 6 times a day.
So you're saying a coffee shop might not be as successful in Ireland?
No, coffee is big now. Coffee is huge now, but it's relatively new. When I was growing up, nobody drank coffee. It was all tea. Like I grew up on a farm, and even we used to have guys coming in, contractors coming in to cut the corn, doing the harvest, and a lot of those guys would not have time to come in and drink tea. So you'd bring them out. I remember as a child bringing out a bottle of tea, a glass bottle of tea with milk, and the guys would put it into their pocket of their jacket and keep driving in their tractors and combine harvesters. Yeah, but tea was important, and tea drank in a field is the nicest way to take tea.
Now, when you bought it in a glass bottle, was it still hot, or were they drinking it cold because of circumstances?
It was hot. Yeah, it was hot.
Okay. That is impressive that you kept it hot in those glass bottles, because that tends to dissipate the heat quickly. Now, was that your job to make it when you grew up on the farm for the migrant or for the workers?
Probably not, but the job was to bring it out to them in the field because they could be down, a long way away from the house. So our job as kids would have been to bring it out in the field. And sometimes the guys would stop and they'd give you a drink of the tea. And you always felt kind of grown up if you got to drink tea with them in the field.
That's kind of cool. Were you always, because you're obviously creative in writing these stories, so were you always telling stories even back then when you were walking the fields, bringing them the tea and stuff?
Probably not telling them stories, but always making up stories in my head and always kind of imagining different things. I was kind of nerdy that way because, like, on a farm, there's not a huge amount of time for stories from a kid, especially kind of fantasy or science fiction. It's very much about getting the work done. So, yeah, I was a bit odd. I was a bit of a black sheep that way, but I was always, I was into art and I was into kind of creative stuff. And being creative is not a huge amount of use on a farm and there's a lot of work to be done.
Okay. So how did you get into liking all of the creative things? Is that something that your family encouraged? Were your siblings and parents also artsy, or is this something that's just you that you somehow developed on your own?
It's probably just me, but my parents did definitely encourage it. I have a book here that I wrote when I was 7 or 8. It's a full novel, and they would have definitely encouraged that and art, but there wasn't really a history of it in the family. And my younger sister is artistic as well, but no, it was kind of just me on my own.
Okay. Now, when you say artistic, is she also a writer, or is she more into the like music or visual mediums?
Well, more kind of visual art, like painting and that kind of
Okay.
thing. Yeah.
Did your art take it beyond the word? Do you also paint?
I used to. I haven't done it in years. But I used to do a lot of it. I love it. But I've kind of lost touch with it, and the writing took over. But yeah, as a kid, I was huge into art and wanted to be an artist, and it's kind of one of the things I wish I maybe did pursue a little bit.
I never made it past the stick figures phase of art.
Yeah, but nothing wrong with stick figures.
Well, I'm colorblind, and I remember distinctly in elementary school having an art teacher tell me I should just give up on dreams of art because I didn't see colors,
Yeah,
and so I just stopped, and I
yeah,
pursued other things. I
yeah.
do think it's part art is part natural skill and part how hard you want to work at it.
It's true.
Uh,
It's true. Yeah, it's definitely a
and I just
craft
never
as
put it to
well.
work. Yeah. So, so when growing up in Ireland, because one of the things as Americans we don't always appreciate when we talk to people from Europe is how old everything around you is, right? Like, not to say we don't have cultures that existed contemporary to when European cultures, but they didn't tend to leave buildings that are still around, right? Like they were more nomadic. So, do you think that growing up in the shadow of history, as you do in Ireland, has affected the way you tell stories?
Absolutely, yeah, hugely. So yeah, we have an ancient history, that goes back thousands of years. We have buildings that are older than the pyramids in Egypt, and it's very much embedded in our schooling and in our communities and our growing up, and it's very much a part of our storytelling. We have all these kind of ancient legends, like of Cuchulainn and Fionn McCool. I don't know if you've ever heard of those guys.
I have not, but now I'm interested.
Okay, well, we Ireland has its own kind of mythology, like the Greek mythology and like the Norse mythology. We have our own kind of pagan gods. We have, gods that came to Ireland, and we've a whole mythology that most of the world don't know about. We have our own language. We have our own kind of writing. We have an ancient culture of storytelling and history and mythology that's very much unexplored by the rest of the world. But we kind of like that as Irish people, that it's just ours. But I think it's only a matter of time before it's going to get released into the world. And like I think it's every bit as good as Greek mythology or Roman mythology. It's just relatively unknown. But yeah, the history and the mythology and the language of Ireland is a huge part of storytelling, and yeah, would be very important to me.
I'll have to look into that more because that's interesting. Half of my family is Scottish and half are German, so I kind of grew up with some of the stories, but the Irish, while there's similarities between Ireland and Scotland, there's also vast differences. So I never really looked across the channel to see what else there was.
Yeah, there would be a lot of similarities, though. We're both Celtic nations, so we would have a lot of similarities, and a lot of our kind of mythological stories are connected with Scotland. Like some of our mythological heroes, like the ones I mentioned, journeyed to Scotland, and there's a famous one about two giants, a giant in Scotland and a giant in Ireland, having a massive battle, and it's how the Giant's Causeway was formed, which is
Okay.
Yeah.
That's kind of neat. I'm gonna have to look some of those stories up. I'm gonna track some of those down. That should be interesting. Now, is that something that they teach when your kids are going through the schooling system?
It is. It's actually we call it when kids start learning history first. We actually we teach them mythology, but they see it as history. So your very first exposure to history are these ancient stories of Cuchulainn and Fionn McCool. But it's really mythology. So they do mythology for a year, and then it eases into history and becomes regular history. But yeah, there's a fine line between the history syllabus and the mythology syllabus.
You make it fun for them, is what you're doing.
Yeah, it's stories really, and I suppose that's what history is. It's stories. But yeah, it's true. Like we have brilliant stories about all these gods. Like if a place that would be well known in Ireland is Tara. Have you ever heard of Tara?
I have, but I recognize the name, but I don't know why I
Yeah,
recognize
Tara,
it.
like at the moment, it's just a hill, about an hour from Dublin, but it was once the ancient capital of Ireland. It's where the High King lived, and on that hill, like there's a stone, an ancient stone, and it was said to be brought here by the gods. And if you place your hand upon it, and the stone cries out, it means you're the next king of Ireland. Now it hasn't cried out in a long time. We haven't had a king in Ireland for a long time, but that was one of the first stories about the Tuatha De Danann, who were a kind of a race of supernatural gods that traveled by flying boat to Ireland when their own home was in danger, and they settled here, and they thought they had found a new land, but they realized there was a tribe here, and there was a huge battle then, and they kind of took over. They had gods, like they had the Morrigan, which was a female god. She was the goddess of war. She could turn into a raven. And yeah, there's all these kind of mad stories that date back thousands of years.
Now, the Morgan I have heard about. Now, we grew up with not the Irish stuff, but I remember learning about like Paul Bunyan and Johnny Appleseed, which is, I guess, our equivalent of folklore.
Yeah.
And they've kind of turned the true history of like the Alamo into almost a cult legend at this point. Kind of made it bigger than it is. So like we teach that kind of stuff too, just different stories. But there's definitely value in stories, I think, in teaching people. So I do agree with you that there's importance in the stories we tell our young folks, which is why I thought it was cool that you write for the youngins.
And I'm a teacher as well, and I think telling stories is a great way to teach, because it's very difficult to remember facts and figures and dates, but if you thread it together in a story, really kids are interested in people, and they're interested in stories of people. So yes, I agree, stories are brilliant.
That's one of the things people like, I was a history major in college, so like obviously I love that stuff, but that's one of the things people have trouble realizing, that if you get past just memorizing the names and the places and the dates, history is just the story of people.
Yeah, it's true.
And it can be just as fascinating. Like there are so many tidbits about people that really existed that would be fascinating to most people if they knew about it, but they're just so focused on, okay, when were they born? When did they die? When did they do this really important thing, that they forget to study the stories.
It's true. Yeah. When I'm introducing history in school, I always write it up on the board, and I write it up as 2 words, his story. And unfortunately, there is a horror in there as well. But as you know, history is mainly male orientated. But yeah, it's the stories of people.
So when it comes to the writing, are you writing to the same age group you're teaching?
Mostly, yes.
Okay. So do you have a preference when it comes to telling the stories that you're writing for science fiction versus fantasy, or do you kind of like all of it?
I do like all of it, yeah, and I like folklore, I like mythology, I like fantasy, I like science fiction. Yeah, I like it all equally. I
Okay.
kind of
Do
like
you,
stuff that's in the future and the past, but I don't really write so much about what's in the present. But yeah, I like different worlds, I suppose.
okay. Now, when you do the fantasy stuff, is there a preference for like going into the myths that we were talking about earlier, or is it does that not required for you?
Well, I've done a lot of kind of retellings of the myths, so my own kind of interpretations of the myths, but I would try and stick kind of strictly to the originals. Yeah, probably in terms of fantasy, no, I've only written one fantasy kind of novel, and no, it had nothing to do with mythology in Ireland. It was about superpowered ninjas, time traveling ninjas.
Okay, that sounds cool though. So, were there? What was the stories you mentioned that your fondest memories of reading were the stories you read as a young kid? What were the stories that stood out to you at that age? Do you remember them still?
Yeah, well, I remember like we read a lot of books as kids, but I especially remember the books our teachers read to us. You know, I had one teacher that read us Charlotte's Web, for example, and that story stayed with me forever. Um, the Iron Man was another one, but I do remember reading lots as a kid. I remember reading all the Enid Blyton stories, Famous Five, The Secret Seven. Um, and then I remember lots of stories from school as well, like, you know, the Salmon of Knowledge, which is a kind of famous story about how Fionn McCool got his powers by eating this magical salmon, which was found in the River Boyne, and it gave him the power of knowledge. So he only had to suck his thumb, and all the knowledge of the world would enter his head, a little bit like the internet before the internet was around. So yeah, those kind of things still stay with me.
If only learning were that easy.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool. So, I like salmon too, so I mean, it's a win-win right there.
Yeah, except he wasn't allowed to eat the salmon. So he tasted, he caught the salmon for his. He was learning. His teacher had been fishing in the River Boyne, which is a kind of a magical river, for this magical salmon for 7 years. And Fionn went to train with him because he had trained. He'd done all the training to become a warrior, but his last piece of his training was learning poetry, because poetry in Celtic times was one of the highest, most honourable jobs you had. So he was on the banks of the River Boyne and he caught this salmon, and his poet master was delighted. But he asked Fionn to cook it, but he warned Fionn not to taste the salmon, because whoever tasted the salmon first would get all the knowledge of the world. So Fionn put it on a spit and was cooking it, and accidentally burnt his thumb, and then put his thumb into his mouth to suck it, and accidentally tasted a bit of the salmon, and then he got the knowledge, you know. So the poor old poet master didn't get anything after being waiting for 7 years.
Poor guy. I bet he wasn't happy.
No, well, in the end he was, because he said he was an old man, and he said this kind of power would suit Fionn better, and it did, because Fionn went on to become a great warrior, and he became the kind of king's bodyguard. And there's multiple stories about Fionn and places in Ireland named after him. And you know, that giant story that I mentioned, like he actually becomes a giant, and he fought that Scottish giant Benandonner. And there's a whole myth about how the Giant's Causeway, which is our only UNESCO site in Ireland, was formed when these two giants fought each other and flung rocks into the sea to make a causeway or a road.
That is kind of cool. All right. Well, I want to talk about the story that brought us here. So we're going to pause for a moment while we shamelessly show for the man, and then we're going to dive into the ticket to Mars.
Cool.
From R. Max Tilsley, author of Brains, the post-apocalyptic pick-a-path adventure with more than 60 endings, comes the Susie Steele adventures. Susie has a heart of gold, a set of bad dreams, and a hidden destiny. 6 months ago, Susie's father went to work and never returned, leaving Susie to her hobby of chasing away nannies. That is, until the mysterious and glamorous Cassandra roars into her life, driving a red sports car and promising to be the best of friends. When Susie stumbles on her father's secret lair, A world of magic, ghosts and mysteries beckons. Can she discover the truth, avoid being expelled from school, and keep a ruthless secret society off her back? She's to have a ghost of a chance. She'll need the help of her best friends, one grumpy cat, and a whole lot of daring. The Susie Steele Adventures from R. Max Tilsley. Book 1, The Steel Trap. Book 2, The Steel Bite. Perfect for readers 9+. Available in print and ebook.
All right. Thank you for sticking with us through that commercial interlude. So got me thinking, were the Pick a Path or Choose Your Own Adventure books big in Ireland? Did those ever make it over there?
Yes, and they were huge in my life. I loved them. I remember getting the first Choose Your Own Adventure on the back of a box of Weetabix, which is cereal. It was a free one, and that was my first introduction. And yeah, I was a huge fan. I even wrote my own, and then I kind of got into game books and played all the game books, the fight and fantasy game books, and the ones where you roll a dice and fight monsters. Okay. But yeah, I was a huge fan of those.
I love those as a kid. I still have my complete set of the Lone Wolf books that I had.
Yeah, I remember the Lone Wolf. Yeah, the Lone Wolf was brilliant. Yeah.
If I could figure out the formula to make those books work, I'd write some myself. But I imagine whoever writes those, like their wall looks like a serial killer with all the strings connecting everything, trying to figure it out.
Exactly. Yeah. Even though there's probably some app that would do it for you now, but yeah, in those days, you can imagine it was lots of bits of string and sticky tape and Post-its.
And editing is a nightmare because not only do you have to edit for grammar, you have to like edit each like arc for continuity to make sure it all makes sense.
Yeah.
For every branching path, and then make sure every branch gets an ending.
Yeah, and some of the endings in the books were rather brutal. It was as if they ran out of space on the page and you just kind of died really quickly.
Yeah. Now, when you read those, did you cheat and read ahead, or did you play it straight?
I read
it all the time.
I was kind of disciplined about it, because every time you died, you were kind of supposed to go back, and I would go back and do it properly. Now, there was one book I remember reading. It was called. It was a ninja series, and I forget Mark Livingstone. No, I'm trying to remember the name of it now, but I remember that one really frustrated me, and I did cheat on that one. But mostly, I was pretty good. Yeah, I didn't cheat.
I did all the time. I peek ahead. Although with the Lone Wolf one, it was a little bit harder to cheat because it was also like, your weapon versus their weapon. So in that, decisions that you made along the way affected it, not just, did you take page 8 or 12?
Yeah, and you also had to have all the little objects and the things that you collected along the way.
Yeah, and that plays with keeping your character sheet accurate was a big deal. So
no, I love those books. I remember the first Lone Wolf book cover. I don't know if I still have it, but I remember the cover was a guy in a green hood, and it was. Really
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that art, man, they don't make art like that anymore for modern fantasy. The art tends to be, I don't know. I don't like some of the new covers where it's just like a monocolor background and then a weird symbol that you see people do. Like, go back to the paintings; those were cool.
Yeah, the detailed illustrations. No, they were brilliant. I can remember them vividly. Though the monsters and all those creatures. There were a lot of them were pen and ink, but they were brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah, and the muted colors kind of added to the sense of dread that the characters were going to be facing.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, thank you, dear listener, for sticking with us through that commercial interlude. We are obviously here to talk to Kieran about his book, Ticket to Mars. So I throw the cover up for you to check out. So where did you get the premise for this book? Where did that come from?
I suppose it came from kind of looking at the Earth and what's happening, and looking at global warming and rising sea levels. And I don't know what it's like over there where you are, but Europe is kind of on fire at the moment. We have forest fires. We have the highest temperatures we've ever had. France and Spain are on fire. The city of Bordeaux in France has been evacuated, and you guys had a lot of fires last year. But it was the whole idea of the Earth in crisis, and what would happen in hundreds of years' time. Would the Earth become a place that you could not live in, and where would we go next? And I suppose the most viable planet to live on is Mars. It's kind of relatively close. It's the same size. It's got a similar kind of day and night. So it was imagining a future where people had left Earth and moved to Mars, but it was a future where really only the rich people had gone and the poor people were still stuck on Earth. So that was kind of where my story began.
Okay. Now, the ticket to Mars, presumably the character that's one of the ones stuck on Earth gets a chance to go to Mars.
Yeah, yeah. So the main character is Vion. He lives with his mum in Newer York, is what it's called, because it's New York, but not as we know it. So the Earth has basically flooded, and various cities have dealt with the flood waters by doing different things. Like Paris have built a huge wall around it. But New York have just built their towers higher and higher and higher. So he lives in one of these towers. They're called Heaven's Ladders, and each of the towers are named after old cities and old countries on Earth. And the towers are all connected by kind of like zip lines that they travel between. And there's a hierarchy in the towers. So the very rich people live at the top, and the poorer people live at the bottom. And the poorer people are constantly being moved out of their houses because of rising flood waters. So Vion lives with his mum, and he's a mid-tower boy, and he dreams like everybody else in New York of going to Mars. And everywhere there's ads for Mars, and especially the main city, which is called Harmonia. And that's all anybody dreams of. And the rich get to go there, but he knows he will never get a chance to go because his mum has a job, but he doesn't think it's ever going to pay enough that he's going to make it. And then he finds out that she has been secretly saving for Mars her whole life, and they almost have enough money to go, and then something terrible happens.
Okay. Now, were you inspired by the movie Elysium, where they had that kind of the good and or excuse me, the strict divide in the social classes?
I don't actually know if I've seen that movie, so then I definitely wasn't inspired by it. No.
Okay. So, were you trying to cover any specific themes when you were writing this novel, or was it more just, this was the base idea and then you had fun?
Yeah, well, I suppose it was kind of looking at it. I was kind of looking at what would humanity do if we had to start society again, and how would we build a new society? And I suppose what I looked at was really what in the novel, what the humans have done is they think they've built a new society, but they've really just replicated what was on Earth, and the things that went wrong on Earth eventually go wrong on Mars. So Vion does eventually make it to Mars, and he thinks it's this really cool, shiny place, got lots of high technology and all this, but underneath there's lots of problems. And really, I suppose the theme is that humans kind of make the same mistakes over and over again, as history shows us.
Okay. Now, are there any secondary characters that factor in this story?
Yeah, he has a cousin, so the cousin would love to go there. His cousin is his best friend, but she doesn't get to make it there. His mom is very important. She's his kind of motivation. So she has saved all this money to go to Mars, and she reckons in a couple of years they will have enough. And then she starts dating this guy who's really good to them and buys them lots of nice things. But then one day they come home and they find that all their money is gone. So he has basically robbed them. And Vion goes to track him down and finds out that he's gone to Mars. So Vion gets himself on this scientific program to follow him to Mars. He gets to Mars under the guise of being a kind of a part of this scientific experiment, because there's not many children on Mars and they want to get more children on Mars. But he's really there to track down this man that has stolen their dreams. But when he gets to Mars, he finds there's all sorts of trouble and problems, and he kind of gets caught up in a revolution.
Now, when he goes to Mars, is he able to take his mom with him?
No. So that's his whole motivation. When she finds out that her life savings and her dreams are gone, she kind of falls apart. She kind of loses her job. She loses her mind. She loses her house. She has to get taken in, and she ends up in this kind of hospital. It's kind of like an asylum in the lower towers. It's called the dollhouse, because basically all the patients are drugged to look like dolls. So his whole motivation for the trip is to get her her money back so that he can take her to Mars. So one of the opening chapters, he's on the spacecraft heading to Mars, and he gets a call from the mum, and we see the mum, and standing behind her, she's is a nurse, and the nurse is kind of prodding her and telling her what to do. But yeah, the mum is a very important part of his motivation for what he does.
Is this a standalone novel, or are there going to be follow-ons?
No, it's a standalone. There could be follow-ons, but I think at the moment it's a standalone.
Okay. What can you tell us about the bad guy without spoilers? Is it the boyfriend that bogarts the money, or are there other antagonists?
It is him, yeah. But it's I suppose it's when he gets to Mars, he realizes that this city of Harmonia is supposed to be, as the name implies, a harmonious place. It's built inside the shell of a dormant volcano. It's capped with this huge glass dome. So they are terraforming Mars, but there is no atmosphere in place yet. So everybody in the city lives inside this dome, and it looks really cool. But when he gets there, he realizes that the people up at the very top of the dome are the really rich people, and the poorer people are down at the bottom. So it's exactly like it is in his home. And there's a huge amount of corruption on Mars. Like he was told there was no army, there was no war. But one of the first things he sees when he lands there is he sees this Martian tank traveling across. So, and he sees weapons and he sees soldiers, and all the children have disappeared mysteriously, and that's why he's brought there. So there's loads of secrets and stuff he's not told about. So really the bad guy is really what they have done, and the society they have created is the kind of bad guy.
Okay, so man versus environment as well as man versus man. All right.
Yeah,
now,
exactly.
Obviously, if you're writing for middle grade, it's probably not rated R. But are there intense scenes that if parents are reading this, they would be concerned about? Like, what is the target age range where they potentially are too young?
Yeah, it's probably 10 plus. But I know you guys are we're a little bit more liberal with age ratings in terms of books for kids over here. A lot of my books before, when I've had American reviews of them, they kind of criticized maybe that they were a little bit too violent or too dark. So we're a little bit more liberal with children's books and the content that can go on this side of the water. But there's nothing gory. There's war in it. There's violence, but there's nothing graphic or gory.
Okay. Since we have space travel, at least as far as Mars, are there aliens in this book?
There are no aliens. No, just humans.
Okay. All right. Was the first person born on Mars named Martian or Marvin? Excuse me.
No, I didn't get into that at all. No.
All right, that's a missed opportunity if they don't do that. Just
yeah. You can have that one.
There we go. Okay. Was there anything that surprised you when you started writing this novel, or do you plot them out so thoroughly that you know exactly where they're going?
No, I don't plot them out. I kind of know where the ending is, and I just I don't plot out the route. So anything that surprised me, I suppose I hadn't planned a revolution or a war to happen on Mars. I had planned on Mars being a kind of a corrupt copy of what was happening on Earth, but I hadn't planned a kind of a revolution to happen. So I suppose that probably surprised me.
Okay. How long is this book? And sometimes middle grade books can be really short, and sometimes they can be as long as proper adult novels. So I'm not assuming.
I think it's about 50,000 words, 200 pages. So it's kind of short compared to an adult novel.
Okay, but still a proper novel in length, because I think the minimum is what, 40,000 to be a novel.
Yeah, but it would be a regular kind of length for a middle grade novel. 50,000 words would be okay. Like I have another novel, and it's around that as well for that age group.
Okay. Now, obviously, it's available right now in print, paperback, and hardcover. Are you planning on doing an audiobook for this? I don't know if middle grade even does audiobooks.
Yeah, it does audiobooks, but it's not on my plans at the moment. No.
Okay. Um, would you want to live on the Mars you created?
No, but if I had to choose between that and living on the Earth I created, I would say yes.
That's fair. That's fair.
Because the Earth is pretty grim.
So where would be better to live on the Earth you created? In the towers in America or whatever was going on in Europe?
Well, we get to see Paris, and Paris is very much preserved. So they kind of have it's as it was, but we get glimpses that it wasn't all easy sailing either. So obviously a lot of people were not allowed to live in the city because that's all that's left of France is Paris, and they built a huge wall around it. So some people got to stay in the city, but we're not told what happened to other people. So I suppose of the two locations that I've created on Earth, I probably would choose Paris, but I would imagine I would have been one of the people that didn't get to live in the city. So
did you address what happened to Ireland in this future?
No, but I assume it's sunk because Ireland is a very wet place. Even in the biggest heat waves, we get rain.
Okay, so your Irish natives are swimming, is what you're telling me.
Yeah, we have our rubber ducks and our canoes, and we're all in the water. Yeah, Ireland is famous, like Scotland, I suppose, for being a very wet place. And for years, we've kind of complained about how wet and cold it is. And this summer, it's become a haven because Europe is basically so hot. Anyone that's gone on holidays to Europe has just been dying to come back to Ireland, where it's a little bit colder and a little bit wetter. So.
Yeah, I'm told Scotland has 3 weather patterns: raining, fixing the rain, and just got done raining.
Yeah. Well, Ireland is very similar.
Okay, all right. So with the culture that you created between Earth and Mars, is there a lot of traffic between the two, or are the flights rare?
The flights are kind of rare, and we don't get to see many flights. The only flight we get to see is the one that Vion's on, and by the time we're introduced to that flight, he's almost there because it takes a few months to travel to Mars. So they're quite rare. In the beginning, they were more frequent when Harmonia was being built, but basically Harmonia, the city on Mars, is full, and the flights are kind of relatively rare. Like there's nothing for Martians to go back to on Earth. Earth is basically destroyed, so there's no reason for them to go back. So yeah, flights are kind of rare.
Now, what kind of tech can we expect? I mean, it's the future, so presumably it's better technology than we have.
Yeah, it's fairly high tech. So it's the kind of tech you would imagine. So the houses are all voice commanded, and you can change the colors of the houses. The houses can become glass. The walls are, at a command, they can switch to being transparent. The food is kind of magically reappears in machines, and we've got robots. What else have we got? Yeah, the tech is fairly high tech, but nothing extraordinary. It's everybody is linked on the one machine, and that kind of controls their lives. So when they work, they don't earn money; they earn credits, and these credits can be used to purchase things, or they can also be used for time off. So the idea is that the harder you work, the more credits you get. But that's the way Vion thinks it works until he goes up into the top of Harmonia and finds out there's loads of rich people that don't work at all, and so he reckons something must be going on.
Okay, were there any secondary characters that stood out to you besides just the 3, the mother, and the antagonist?
Yeah, no, that's probably there are a few smaller characters he meets, but they wouldn't be major characters, no.
Okay. So given everything that you did to the characters in the Ticket to Mars, if you met him in a back alley, is he going to beat you up, or are you going to be okay?
I'd say he might threaten to beat me up, but he might let me go because it does have a kind of a happy ending, or a hint at a happy ending. Kids' books in general have happy endings. Very few children's books have bleak endings. So this book, even though it's pretty bleak for much of it, does end on a positive note. And the society in Harmonia learns from its mistakes. Its government changes and they decide to start again. So yeah, and his mother does get to come to Mars in the end. So he probably wouldn't beat me up, but he probably would have some words with me.
Is Harmonia the only colony on Mars, or are there others?
Well, without spoiling it, it's supposed to be the only one. But there is another secret one that he discovers. It's kind of an underground one. It's in a mine. And it's called Cadmus, and it's where all the children have gone. So the children have disappeared, and a lot of them have escaped, and that's where the rebellion begins. And he ends up there and becomes part of it. So there is one other location with people.
So of all the tech that you created in your magical future, is there any that you'd want for daily life now, if you could bring it into your house?
There's a lot of the rich people have these. They're basically like spheres or balls that follow them around, and they carry stuff for them. And wherever you go, it just rolls after you. I thought that'd be pretty cool, pretty handy. I wouldn't mind that.
Yeah.
Going to school and bring the fox in.
Yeah, that would be pretty convenient. All right. So is there anything we didn't cover about Ticket to Mars that you think the listeners need to know before we wrap this up?
No, I think you've covered it well enough. But like one of the, you ask about what are some of the cool things on Harmonia, but for Vion, one of the cool things is that he gets to see things that we would take for granted. So he gets to see pets, for example. There are no pets on Earth. But he gets to see in the richer parts of Harmonia a woman with a pet dog, and he's amazed by a dog. Like, he's obviously learned about dogs the same way as we have learned about dinosaurs, but nobody has pets where he comes from. He also gets to see real wooden objects, wooden doors. Where he comes from, it's all kind of plasti wood. It's what it's called. So the things that are amazing to Vion are things that we consider kind of relatively normal.
I guess it's all about perspective in that point.
Yeah. It's kind of like on the Titanic. The Titanic, there were 3 different classes, and the poor people were in steerage, and the rich people got to bring pets and pianos and everything else. So it's a little bit like that,
Yeah. So all right. Well, this is the part, dear listener, where I remind you to please be kind and speak your mind on the reviewing platforms. Your reviews help the right readers find the right book, so it really does make a difference. And if you buy this book for your young reader, help them write a review. Start that habit young. Get them used to telling everyone about the books they're reading, and then share it on your accounts, so that way other mothers, fathers, aunts, and uncles know that this is an appropriate book for their young ones, and whether that fits. But if people wanted to follow you on the internet, Kieran, where might they do that?
Probably my website is the best place to go. So it's Kieran Fanning at kieranfanning.com. KIERANFANNING.com is probably the best place to go.
And we will link that in the show notes, dear listener. You can follow us on our Linktree, linktr.ee, Linktree/Blasters and Blades Podcast. Again, Linktree/Blasters and Blades Podcast, where we link to all the things: the BitChute, the Rumble, the YouTube, the TikTok, the Twitters. We've got our Spotify, our Discord, our Substack, our Blasters and Blades Facebook group and Facebook page. You can email us at blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. Again, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com for professional purposes only, people. Save the shenanigans from Adam Stabby's tab over there on the Instagram, the Twitter, and the email. You can support the show by going to buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Hanley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Hanley. These episodes aren't free to produce, so every penny helps, and we appreciate your patronage. Be sure to put in the comment section that it is for the podcast, and we will attribute the money accordingly. And with that, I would like to thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For my crazy co-host, I am J.R. Hanley, and this was the Blasters and Blades podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time. We will indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. All right, thank you for coming on, Kieran. This was fun.
Great, JR. Thank you very much for having me.
All right, with that, yeah, you did great. And with that,